So all of the 15 children went through school?
Yeah.
Okay, and did anybody go on to a trade school or college?
Yes, they went to college, most of them.
Okay. And then your husband did what? What was his trade?
He was a carpenter.
And how did he learn that trade?
From his dad was a carpenter, and also in the Navy. He was a carpenter's mate.
Okay. Okay, so you were in New York, and then you migrated here to Kansas.
Right.
And so how'd you get here?
By train.
And how was that experience?
Oh, it was a good experience.
Okay, so no difficulties?
No, we just got on a train and
just came.
You know,
and you had one child at the time. Then you had a second child here, and so then you went back to New York now because of he couldn't find work here. Is that what you said? Mm-hmm. And so how about that trip? How'd you get back to New York?
By truck. My husband had a truck. He put all his machinery and everything on the truck, and we came back to New York. Then we stayed in New York for about 10 years, and then we went to New Hampshire. See, when we lived in New York, my husband lived on the island because he wouldn't live in tenement section, and he was a builder. Mm-hmm. So he built a house on the island, Long Island. Then Long Island got crowded because Brooklyn came to Long Island. Mm-hmm. And Long Island ended up like Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. And so we moved to New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And we lived in New Hampshire for 20 years, where he became a stair builder. Okay, so when you moved from Dodge City back to New York, you did not move into New York City. No, I lived with my mother until my husband built us a home in Long Island. And Long Island, okay. What was that? Was there a lot of people there? Was it congested? Was it a wooded area? Yes, it was a wooded area. Okay. And then we lived there for a while, and then people started to come there, you know, from Brooklyn. And they took Brooklyn with them. So he didn't want that? No. So we moved to New Hampshire. Okay. Where we lived in New Hampshire for 20 years. Okay. And that was a wooded area, or that was, how's the population density, you know, how many people? A lot, or not too many? No, there wasn't. New Hampshire, no, we lived in well, what would you call it? At the outskirts, in New Hampshire. Like a suburb? Like a suburb. Okay. Mm-hmm. Like a suburb in New Hampshire. And we lived there for 20 years, where he was a builder. I mean, a stair builder. Mm-hmm. He built stairs there. And then HUD went down, so we moved to Kansas. Mm-hmm. And we stayed here. Okay, so then after retirement, you came back to the Midwest. Yeah. So about how long you didn't really live in the Midwest too long? I mean, for a minimal amount of time, because you said you couldn't get work. Well, but then you retired and came back here, and then lived here for how long from your retirement? We went to New Hampshire. Right. And then we lived in New Hampshire 20 years. And from New Hampshire, we came back to Kansas. Right, and then lived here. And we lived in here for 20 years. For 20 years, okay. Right. And New York, you lived in Long Island for about how long? For about 10 years. For about 10 years. Okay. All right, so we talked a little bit about your family, talked a little bit about Grandpa's family, talked a little bit about the difference in food, right? Mm-hmm. And what about, when you look, with New York, what about the diversity, the difference between the population in New York and the population in Kansas? I mean, what, as far as you and Grandpa's reaction to, you know, when you came out here and you looked out and you see the land, what did you think? Well, when I first looked out, I says, oh my goodness, I said, why do they have to have all this land and we have to live, you know, so crowded like? Mm-hmm. I said, I didn't realize that they were growing wheat here. Mm-hmm. And making a living for us. Okay, so you were aware just of the open space, right? And how little space then you had. Not realizing that. How old were you? When I first at this first experience, here, yeah, 22. 22, so you were a young adult. And what about Grandpa's experience then, going from the open space to the tenements? What was his reaction? Well, he just, it was too crowded for him. When school came out, he said, oh my goodness, he said, where did they all come from? He said, I could never live like this.
And what did he mean? Just all the people?
Yes, there was too many people for him. He could not live in a congested area like that. He was used to wide open spaces. He felt closed in, you know. So right away he started thinking about, building a house on the island, and that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
okay.
then we
and that was a nice compromise then for both of you? Was there enough people there for you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of. Okay, well, in some of that...
I like to be around people. He liked the wide open spaces.
So did you have enough people, and did he have enough space eventually?
Yeah, he had his space, but I never did. No.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about movement. We talked about, immigration, from
yeah.
We don't know too much, I guess, about Grandpa's, if he was, what generation, do you know what generation he was, first or second? How long was Grandpa's family here from Ireland? Do you have any idea? Because, he's gone now,
yeah,
we can't ask him.
Time,
so they were more than first generation, they had been here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they did not speak, they spoke only English, right? They didn't have a second.
They only spoke
And did anybody
English.
else then at that time speak another language? Like in New York, you said there was different populations, different areas where people spoke
different languages.
Yeah, but not here?
Not here, no.
Everybody
to me,
spoke.
Everybody spoke English.
And did you ever feel what did you, about having a second language, being bilingual?
No, because when I was with out of my home, I spoke English.
Mm-hmm.
But only in our home, we always spoke Italian because my parents didn't speak English.
Okay. And did they ever have a problem, Grandpa?
No.
Did he ever?
Yes. It was very confusing to him because they were very emotional.
Okay.
And he never knew what was going on. The hands were flying and the mouths were going, and he never knew what was going on.
So what about the domestic life between your family, in New York, Italians, and then the domestic life in Dodge City, Kansas, with a large Irish Catholic family?
It was very different. Mm-hmm. It was just different. It was a different environment.
Mm-hmm. And can you...
Well, they were always quiet. They never argued, and it was very different in my family.
You guys weren't quiet?
No, It was very noisy.
Okay.
And with them was quiet, and they never argued, but my family, they always well argued.
They were always fighting?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that really is kind of the experiences that you had, and then of course, we had talked a little bit before the interview, so do be prepared. And so again, kind of with this movement and kind of what people are moving towards, kind of away from something towards something else. One of the things that you had mentioned earlier was about an inner peace. When we compare New York and we look at land and population and families and the domesticity, domesticity. Can you?
Yes, I always felt like there was an inner peace in Kansas, and I really love Kansas. I really do.
Do you love it that you're a New Yorker in Kansas?
Yes.
That was something we talked about too. Is when we have identity, what then do you identify with as closest to yourself? When you look at, this is what defines me. If you described yourself, how would you describe yourself?
Well, I always make up my mind to be happy with what I have. I make the best of what I have. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what took me through life. I always had this inner peace in Kansas.
And a lot of, obviously, just for the literary purposes, we study different texts, and the dynamics, obviously, within those texts are religion, nationality, personal identity. Would you have like a hierarchy, like an order that you would define? Like if you said, I am, would it be your religion, your nationality? Would it be,
I always say I'm Italian. I just feel, I'm Italian.
So Italian is a big part of who you are. That
I'm Italian.
And then what would be second? You're Italian from where?
From New York.
Okay. So even though you've lived out here, you would say, I'm an Italian from New York. And yet your family identity to your husband and your children, is it mother, wife, individual person?
A mother and wife. I'm a home person. I'm a homebody.
I guess we didn't discuss that too much. You worked before, right?
Yes.
Before you got married, but then after you got married, did you pursue a career or regret
No,
not?
I didn't. No, I was always happy to be a Like I said, I'm a homebody. I like to be home.
Okay, and home, what does that mean to you when you say home? Because we've talked about you living in different regions. We've talked about you marrying into a completely different culture from where you were originally from. What does that mean, home?
Well, home, I mean, where my family is home.
And now your children live in different places now. Your son lives where?
Well, only one son lives in New Hampshire.
Okay, so he
But
went back.
my daughter and my son live here.
And then you have grandchildren.
Yes, and I have a lot of grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren too.
And you maintain those connections and those attachments? Okay, and so where your family is...
it's home to me.
Home. Okay, and so it's not so
much. It doesn't matter where I live as long as my children are with me.
Or close, I guess.
Yes.
'Cause does anybody live with you now?
No, I live by myself.
Okay, so you live by yourself. And Grandpa, where's your husband?
Yes, my husband passed away, going on 13 years ago.
And so you have lived alone?
Yes.
For a good portion of that time. Okay, well, we talked about the diversity, we talked about the different regions that you've lived in, we've talked about the different culture, of your husband's family and your family. And I guess, kind of we talked a little bit about the different attitudes of New Yorkers and Westerners, and kind of the way, in a sense, we're defined by attitude a little bit.
Right.
Do you want to say any more about that, do you think?
No.
No. Okay. And then I guess the last thing that we could kind of discuss just to conclude the interview would be if you were to give advice to, say, somebody younger than you, and in kind of along that line of having to move or having to go or having to suffer a change, you know what I'm saying, a drastic change. So like I said, we've talked about the difference between, well, and you said you're Catholic, but Irish Catholic was a little bit different, so you married into a different culture or region where a person has to move from one place to another. What would you give advice to somebody else?
Make the best of what you have always. No matter where you are, people are people, and just make the best of what you have. And
when you say make the best, is that emotionally, financially, stick with a marriage, or how can somebody make the best of a situation, do you think?
It's attitude. It's your mental attitude in life that counts.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate you, taking the time, and I hope that we represented you, in a way that you wanted your story told.